Sometimes things happen to us that we just cannot explain, no matter how many resources are available or what information we can find. There are things that can never be understood, and that is a commanding factor of life. Now, a question. I know some, if not many of you have had friends, even best friends, that disappear from your life without a rhyme or reason. That very same thing happened to me with my friend Marcus. We were best friends throughout high school and carried the friendship on well into our 20s, but one day he simply disappeared. I don't mean he was reported missing and the police were involved. I just mean he left without telling me, his best friend. I spoke to his mother and she said he had gone on a trip to northern Alaska. When I asked her why, she said, "He never gave me a reason." I could hear the sorrowful tone in her voice. Like myself, she missed him too. But out of nowhere he came back. He told no one he had returned, and one day he showed up on my doorstep as if he had never left. I admit he looked good, better than I remembered. He seemed healthy, if you can understand. "Marcus, you're back," I remarked, bewildered. "Yeah, man," he said in his smooth demeanor. He had his hands tucked into the pockets of the jean jacket he was wearing. "Got back a couple days ago." "You look well. Where you been, man?" I asked casually. I noticed his face was flushed red, but it was probably just the lighting outside because the sun was setting. "Yeah, thanks. I've just been traveling, finding myself." He answered, but he seemed indifferent about conversation. It made me wonder why he came here if he wasn't looking to talk. "Well, that's cool. Did you want to come in?" I asked while gesturing my hand through the door. He nodded and brushed past me into my home. "Thanks, Derek," he said nonchalantly, as if this was a routine occurrence. "Something up?" I asked as I closed the door behind me. Marcus flipped his wavy blonde hair and sighed. "No, not really. I just have a proposition for you." It was strange that this was how he decided to start the first conversation between us in a long time. "A proposition? Forgive me for saying this, but we haven't spoken in quite some time, man, and I don't know if I'm really in the position to dive headfirst into something new." "No, it's not like that," began Marcus. He didn't appear slighted by my response, which was welcoming to see. "I was just wondering if you'd be interested in coming with me on a trip, a vacation of sorts. It wouldn't be long, just a week up north." "With who, you?" I asked with a hint of scrutiny. "Yeah, just me," he said quickly. For some reason his fingers were twitching like he could barely control himself from having a breakdown of some kind. "Why so sudden? And why me? I mean, Marcus, where have you actually been this whole time? I find it strange you would come to me of all people for this hurried request of yours. I need someone to come with me. It's important that you understand, Derek. I'm not the same person I was when I left. I am something much more unique. But I cannot be left to the masses. I must be quelled." He was speaking in completely vague sentences, the context of which I couldn't understand. "I have to be honest with you, Marcus. I don't know what the fuck you're saying to me right now." I wasn't going to lie, but I saw a slight shift in his eyes upon hearing my candor. He sat down in my recliner and clasped his hands together. "Listen, are you in or not?" He wouldn't even look me in the face when he asked. He simply hung his head with his eyes on the floor. "Well, I don't know. Where would we be going exactly?" "A cabin up north. Once we get there, I'll give you a list of instructions that you must adhere to. I promise you will understand." I took a deep breath. Clearly Marcus was in distress and needed help. I wasn't going to leave him to fend off against whatever demons were riding his shoulders. I figured he had become an addict and wanted someone to look after him while he got himself cleaned up. "I suppose," I said quietly. "Awesome. Thanks, Derek." He said hastily, "You won't have to pay for anything. I've got that all covered. Just be ready tomorrow morning and we will head up there." "Tomorrow? Damn, that's definitely short notice," I said, already thinking about what I would tell my boss. "Don't worry about work, man. Just trust me, even if you've never trusted anyone," he remarked as if he read my mind. He then stood up and began walking to the door. "I don't know what happened to you, but something's definitely different," I mentioned as I opened the door for him. "You don't know the half of it," he said before walking outside. "See you in the morning. Bring anything you're comfortable with bringing, but don't overpack." I nodded, even though he was facing away from me, and he walked off down the sidewalk. How had he got here? Obviously he didn't drive if he was walking. Something seriously weird was going on with him. My boss was fine with me taking some time off. I figured it wouldn't actually last a week anyway, so in my head all would be well. The next morning I was ready to go and Marcus arrived just after 9 a.m. to pick me up. I brought my things outside. I had only packed some snacks, a flashlight, blankets, a pillow, my medication, and several outfits for the outdoorsy life. "The cabin has beds and blankets," said Marcus from the driver's seat of the old SUV he arrived in. "Yeah, well, I prefer to feel a sense of comfort that I can only achieve by having things that belong to me." "If you say so," he remarked. His lack of engagement was already growing stale. I got in the passenger seat and we sped away without another word shared between us. Every so often I would glance at Marcus to study him. While he did seem healthy, there was something innately different about him that I couldn't put my finger on. He was jittery, easily startled, and on edge. We drove for a good 6 hours before pulling off at a rest area. Marcus seemed alert, but for some reason he said, "We're going to sleep here for the night." "The night? Have you gone blind, dude? It's barely 3 in the afternoon." "Yes, I know. I'm hungry and I need to rest," said Marcus quietly. "I can drive, man, if that's the issue," I asked reassuringly. He turned to look at me with viciously bloodshot eyes, as if he had been staring at the sun the entire drive. "No, you don't know the way." "You can tell me the way. I have GPS?" "No, Derek, just close your eyes or do something for a bit. I'm hungry." The way he said hungry was like a ravenous animal, like his desire to feed was overthrowing his decision-making. Fine, go get something to eat then," I said, kicking my feet up on the dash and leaning the seat back. Marcus stammered when he responded, "No, not yet. When night falls, I will." "You're acting really strange, man. Is everything good?" Instead of responding, he only nodded slowly. I didn't say anything back, but I did watch him from the corner of my eye for some time. I noticed he was watching every single person who walked into the rest stop, like a starving fiend. I passed the time by reading on my phone, listening to music through my headphones, and after night fell, I closed my eyes. Up until I decided to try and sleep, Marcus hadn't taken his eyes off the entrance of the rest stop. I can't even recall if I saw him blink once. Luckily, I managed to fall asleep relatively quickly. However, I was awoken abruptly when Marcus heaved his body back into the driver's seat as if he were running from something. He was absolutely covered in blood, his mouth and most of his face, his hands, his shirt and pants everywhere. "Marcus, what the fuck, man?" I asked intensely. He swallowed audibly. "I feel better now. We can keep going." I could see his teeth stained red from the dim light produced by the rest area. "No way, man. You're going to tell me what happened to you." Without looking at me, he said, "I had to eat, Derek. We all have to eat." "What in the fuck are you talking about, Marcus? What did you eat, a barrel of blood?" "Not quite." He then started the vehicle and shifted it into reverse. I reached out and shifted it back into park. When I did, he turned towards me and grabbed my wrist. His grip was insurmountably strong. It felt like he could crush my arm if he had the mind to do it. "Derek, let go," was all he said while his entire body was visibly trembling. I didn't know what else to do, so I listened. I carefully brought my hand back to my lap, and he shifted into reverse once more before bringing us back onto the freeway. I couldn't keep my eyes off him, but he wouldn't look at me anymore. Not until we reached the cabin. The overwhelming smell of blood had filled the vehicle, and I had gagged a few times from it. The pungent aroma wafting off Marcus was almost unbearable. I checked my phone. Of course, there was no signal out here, and I caught a glimpse of him watching me from the other side of the SUV. "Calling the police is futile," said Marcus through his blood-stained teeth. "Tell me what you did back there," I shouted at him, unsure of what else to say. "I did what I had to," he said while walking towards the front door of the cabin. "Marcus, please, man, I can help. Just tell me what's going on." He froze as if he really was about to answer me, but instead he reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Then he unlocked the door and went in without saying another word. I stood outside for a long time. I didn't want to go inside and see him sitting there painted with blood, but something told me that Marcus needed help, so I went in. He was sitting on a dusty couch in fresh clothes. He must have showered too, because his skin was clear of the red tinge that had dominated it before. One thing was different, though. He had lost most of his hair. I don't mean little clumps or bald spots. I mean there were only a few strands of hair remaining. Furthermore, he had patches of raw skin on his face, and I'm sure they were on his body as well. I sat in a chair across from him and observed his seemingly deteriorating form. His eyes were fixed on the rickety floorboards beneath us, and he had his palms placed flat on his thighs. After 5 solid minutes without so much as a twitch, he finally raised his head. His eyes met mine, but his were almost black. There were dark blue veins forming a webbed pattern from the corners of his eye sockets, and his lips were dry and cracked. When he spoke, it was with a breathy and raspy tone. "I'm going to tell you a story, Derek. When I am finished, you will do something for me. You cannot say no. You must do it." "I can't make promise—" "You must!" Marcus suddenly shouted. He had raised himself up further, but something wasn't right. His spine was longer somehow, like it had been stretched, making him appear much taller even when sitting down. Okay, I said timidly. His shouting struck a drastically fearful chord within me. "Good," he mumbled under his breath, then he began his story. "As you know, I went to Alaska. It wasn't for nothing. I had actually met a girl up there on an app." He grinned slightly, but it quickly faded. "When I say this, I mean it. She was perfect, well, for me at least." He stopped for a moment and I noticed he was eyeing my hands, but then he continued. "Anyway, her name was Claire and we really hit it off. It was one of those love-at-first-sight moments. Seriously, Derek, she was everything I could have ever wanted or needed in a woman." I uttered a sound of acknowledgement, so he knew I was listening as he went on. "She was a simple person and she lived in an old town. I can't even remember the name of it now, but we made a life for ourselves there. However, she started acting strange. She would ask to have guests over constantly as if I wasn't enough. I don't say that in a jealous way. I mean, she literally wanted someone else over every single day, and she reeked of desperation. It was like her life depended on it." While he spoke, one of his fingernails fell off and landed with a quiet ticking sound on the floor. Marcus didn't seem to mind because he kept talking. "Eventually I caved. I invited one of her friends over, a local guy who worked at the town's bakery. About an hour before he arrived, Claire called me into the bedroom. She had this weird, almost evil tone in her voice, but I disregarded it. I thought that she may have been looking to get intimate before this friend of hers arrived, but that wasn't the case at all." "Are you sick, Marcus?" I asked, as I watched 2 more fingernails slide off his fingers onto the floor. He didn't answer me, not directly anyway. He looked up at me and his left eye clouded over with a milky white color. Was he dying right before me? Marcus picked at one of the scaly gray patches of skin on his hand. It only made his other nails fall off, but he didn't seem to mind or notice because he went on. "As I entered our bedroom, the door closed behind me. Claire was standing there with a rope and a gag. That only solidified my assumption about her need for intimacy, so I let her tie me up. But instead of getting frisky, she gagged me and left the room. I tried to get her attention, but obviously she couldn't hear me." "How long were you like that?" I asked gently. I wanted him to feel like I had genuine interest. "Longer than I expected. I heard her friend come inside and I tried to yell to get his attention, but it was no use. That's when the screams started. There were horrendous noises of agony coming from the other room, and they weren't from Claire." He sighed again faintly. During the conversation, his entire body had begun turning a pale gray color, and the last bits of hair he had left fell to the floor. There was this squelching sound and another sound I can only liken to a saw cutting meat. I hated every moment being tied to that bed in our barely lit room. "Where are you going with all of this, Marcus? Are you saying Claire killed her friend?" "She didn't just kill him, Derek. She ate him." "What?" I exclaimed vehemently as my stomach turned. "Yeah, she ate him, and when she was full, she brought the scraps of what was left into the bedroom. She removed the gag and told me if I didn't eat, she would consume my flesh as well." Did you do it?" I asked with curiosity. He looked down and then up before slowly nodding. "I did. Marcus, man, I don't know what to say. Just keep listening," he said solemnly. I had to hold my mouth open while she let the blood of her friend drip inside. She told me that if I did, then I'd never be sick again. I'd never worry about anything but eating. It made me remember all the times she had gone out for the night, only to come back looking more youthful than before. I shifted in the chair and Marcus stared at my hands again for far too long. I was growing uncomfortable by his lustful gaze. The next time he spoke, his voice had diminished into something gravelly and hoarse. I did not fight her. I did what she asked. I hoped that she had just lost her mind, and when she was satisfied, I'd make my escape. But I was wrong. The flesh, that is, the consumption of it, made me a new being. It gave me strength, vitality, and an iron constitution. I felt the best I had ever felt in years. But then came the hunger. Hunger? I questioned calmly, although I was reminded of when he mentioned how hungry he was at the rest area. Yes, Derek, the hunger for human flesh was insatiable. It didn't matter how much I ate, my body would feel like it had been further deprived of sustenance. I craved warm, running blood, almost like a vampire, and Claire did too. Before we knew it, we had slaughtered the entire town and nobody saw it coming. But after that, Claire, she turned into something feral, something less human and more animalistic. Like you are now? I asked with a hint of concern. Yes, she became this creature. It was grotesque and malformed. She wasn't my Claire anymore, so I did what any loving partner would do. I put her out of her misery. You killed her? I ended her suffering. I see. That's when I came back down here. I couldn't live up there alone, but I also realized I couldn't be left alive at all. Derek, I desperately want to be with Claire again, whether there's still a place for my soul in heaven, or if I'll be sentenced to an eternal hell for the things I've done. As long as Claire's there, I'll be happy. What are you saying exactly, Marcus? I want you to kill me. You what? I admit, I chuckled a little because the notion was ridiculous. I want you to take the shotgun out of the gun safe and blow my fucking head off so I can't devour another innocent person. Marcus was being serious. I could tell by his tone, and the longer this conversation went on, the more his body changed. I finally managed to ask the question I desperately wanted to know the answer to. Did you eat someone at the rest area? I ate an entire family, he said without remorse. I didn't know what to say. What could you say? All I could do was gasp while remaining at a loss for words. I called the police from the payphone afterwards, so they should be there now. He began harshly. I chose that particular rest area because the cameras don't work. I had staked it out before even coming to you. It was all planned. But I did it for you. For me? You ate an entire family for me? No, I mean, I made it so you couldn't be connected to what happened. The police are none the wiser, and in reality, you've done nothing wrong. This is fucked up, Marcus. I know, I'm sorry, Derek. I need you to honor my request now, though, before it's too late. What happens if I don't? I asked out of curiosity. Marcus stood up hulkingly tall and groaned a bellowing, low, rumbling roar. You cannot deny my desire for death. End my pain, like I ended the pain for Claire. His breathing was rapid and fierce, but he managed to calm himself down. I apologize for scaring you, he said in his gruff voice. Marcus, you were my best friend once. I can't kill you? You have to. This is why I came to you, because you still are my best friend, and I didn't want to ask a random stranger. They wouldn't understand, but you can understand. His face grew long, and it was accompanied by many painful grunts by Marcus. I need you to do this for me. I do not want to hurt anyone else. Even now the hunger calls to me. It is taking every ounce of strength I have left to resist lashing out at you and devouring every tasty morsel of flesh covering your ripe and ravishingly delicious body. He shook his head like a madman before his eyes met mine once again. Please, Derek, I am begging you. I don't know what changed in me, but hearing my once best friend pleading for his death no longer perturbed my emotions. I stared at his rapidly transforming body for an indeterminate amount of time before getting up and walking to the gun safe. It was already unlocked. He must have done that while I waited outside. I reached in and grabbed the only gun in the case, the shotgun Marcus had mentioned. I assumed it was already loaded. If Marcus had planned this much, then surely he planned that too. I walked back to the chair and sat down, and a gnarled, black-toothed grin spread on Marcus's veiny gray face. Thank you, Derek. I can't live with myself any longer, and this is the best option. Do not take pity on me. Do not feel guilty or ashamed. Take pride in the fact that you have expelled a ruthless creature from this world. I pumped the shotgun and aimed it at his head. My heart was pounding and my hands were sweating. "Oh, one more thing," he remarked. "In the glove box of the SUV are my life savings. Take it all and do with it what you will. I ask that you never tell my mother about this or anyone else. It will be our secret." He then took one last deep breath. "Okay, I'm ready. Do it." Just as I was pulling the trigger, Marcus's body twisted and contorted into a far more disturbing visage, and as the shot rang throughout the cabin, his blood and viscera splattered against the couch, the floors, the walls, and even the ceiling. His painful shrieking stopped, and his body ceased all movements. It was over. I sat there with the shotgun in my lap, still aimed at Marcus's corpse for most of the day. I couldn't bring myself to get up, or do anything else but stare at my headless former best friend. Eventually I found the will to stand. After I was on my wobbly 2 feet, I took a sheet from one of the bedrooms and draped it over Marcus. I searched the entire grounds of the cabin for a shovel because I wanted to bury him, but I couldn't find one. It was cold outside anyway, and I'm sure he wouldn't want me to die from digging his grave. I did, however, find some matches. It was the middle of winter, so I thought it would be better to just burn the cabin down. I didn't want Marcus's body to rot there on the cold couch, and as I dropped a lit match on it, the fabric immediately engulfed into a mighty blaze. I walked out of the cabin and got into the driver's seat of the SUV, and that's when I remembered Marcus had the keys. I couldn't help but laugh about the irony of it all. Marcus had left 10 grand in the glove box for me. I ended up having to hike down the driveway and up the road until someone stopped to pick me up. They drove me to the nearest town, Grand Marais, I think it was called. It was a small town, but the people were friendly. I rented a room at their local inn and have been here for 3 days just thinking about Marcus and what he went through. I thought about if I was responsible for the family he murdered and ate, but I had no idea what was going on at the time. I was only along for the ride until I had to play my part, my role in ending Marcus's painful life. If your best friend or even friend returns to you after having been gone and without contact for years, be careful if they ask for you to take a trip with them. And always remember the mysteries of the world can outweigh grounded reality. Nothing is as it seems, even Marcus. Be safe, everyone. I hope none of you look down on me.